presentations to Helen. First, caricature that is on your programs of Helen, which I would like to present to her. Helen, come on up. I'm running out of room. Why don't you hold it back? And second, Helen, on behalf not only of the National Press Club, the Board of Governors, and the National Press Foundation, but of all of your colleagues in this town, all of your friends all over this country and all over the world, the Fourth Estate Award. Thank you very much. I'm going to hold on that for you.
A little hard to hear your obituary when you think you're still alive. Sam, we really wanted to provide the helicopter motor roar while you were speaking, couldn't manage it. Good evening, Mr. President, colleagues, friends, and relations. I am deeply honored to receive this award from the National Press Club and deeply grateful. I'm also grateful to United Press International, which has allowed me to cover a great beat of infinite variety, frustration, and fun, and to my colleagues in UPI, who have always made me look good. In the end, I guess I owe it all to presidents, past and present. I've always felt greatly privileged to cover the White House and to have that proverbial ringside seat to instant history. Irreverent as I may seem, early on, I decided that presidents were human too. I'm not sure when I reached that conclusion. Some of them were all too human with their joys, their sorrows, and their rare nobility. Presidents, of course, are a study in contrasts. Each has put his own stamp on the White House. Each wants to go down in the pages of history for greatness. But greatness calls for presidents to rise above themselves and to rise to unforeseen occasions. And sometimes they have. One man with courage is a majority, and often one hopes that a president will be that kind of person. One thing I've learned in my years at the White House, and particularly in the era of the Watergate scandal, all roads lead to Rome. The White House gives the orders, sets the tone, and it's the president's political philosophy that prevails. In the end, it is the president who must be, above all, credible and accountable. I saw two presidents go down the drain because they had lost their credibility and they could no longer convince, persuade, or govern. Lyndon Johnson over Vietnam and Richard Nixon in the Watergate scandal. I can assure you there is no joy in the fall from grace of any president. On the other hand, there is some satisfaction in knowing that there are safeguards against the abuse of power and that no man, not even a president, is above the law. As for the press, we defend the people's right to know almost everything. For a nation ignorant and free never was and never will be a democracy. We know that information is golden. It's the sine qua non of giving people choices before they are faced with a fait accompli. It is our role to see that people are in on the takeoffs as well as the landings. From my view from the bridge, secrecy is more harmful to a free society than almost any so-called leak. All the presidents have fallen victim to the syndrome of secrecy, and they all become apoplectic over disclosures that often legitimately belong in the public domain, dealing with our fate. But then they get over it, sometimes, that is, unless they resort to lie detectors or the plumbers, viewing information as their private preserve. On the question of credibility, the press and press secretaries also must live up to the high standards that they set for presidents. Come to think of it, I think our credibility stacks up pretty well against, say, presidents. We in the press know that in the eyes of many, our role is dubious, that we are self-appointed watchdogs of democracy, anointed by none, feared by some, and guided, we hope, by one main ethical goal, to pursue the truth wherever it leads us. We reporters are tested daily for our devotion to accuracy and our profound responsibility to the American people. We too are subject to a public judgment. Our report card is on the front page every day, and when we fail all. The importance of a free and robust press cannot be underestimated. Clearly, no dictatorship can tolerate a free press or survive under one. As you can see, I don't waste my sympathy on presidents, particularly since I think that they enjoy one of the greatest honors that can be bestowed on anyone, and that is the trust of the American people. I'll go with Jeff Carter, the president's youngest son, who walked over to a group of reporters and cameramen in Plains, Georgia, on a Christmas day as we were watching Carter play on the front porch with his grandchildren, obviously playing for the cameras. Don't you feel sorry for your father? The burdens, the press always watching, Jeff was asked, and he said no, he asked for it. And I'll go with Justice Brandeis, who said that a constant spotlight on public officials lessens the possibility of corruption. Every president has had his troubles with the press, dating back to George Washington. In our press room at the White House, there's a photograph of FDR with the inscription to reporters from their devoted victim. Truman said, "When the press stops abusing me, I'll know I'm in the wrong pew." Kennedy said, "I'm reading more and enjoying it less." What LBJ said is unprintable. And Carter always seemed to be saying, "Lord, forgive them, for they know not what they do." As for Reagan, well, it's like those silent movies. He thinks that we should be seen and not heard. And when the Sandinistas fired on press helicopters near the Honduran border a few months ago, Reagan said, "There's some good in everyone." I think that Amy Carter kind of summed up the attitude toward the media when her mother escorted her to school on the first day of class after the Carters had moved into the White House, and they wanted to show that Amy was going to an integrated school, public school. The press had been alerted that they could record this great moment in history and never harass Amy again. Walking down the path to the school door, holding her mother's hand, Amy looked at the reporters and cameraman flanking the walk and said, "Mom, do we still have to be nice to them?" I have many memories covering the White House. There have been times to laugh, times to cry, times to wonder. I remember when we covered John F. Kennedy during the transition days in 1960 at Georgetown Hospital after his son John was born. And we asked him if he would like his son to grow up to be president. And he said, "I just want him to be healthy." And I remember riding on Air Force One when Kennedy came back, and we teasingly asked him what would happen if the aircraft crashed. "I know one thing," he said, "your name will be just a footnote." And I remember Jackie coming aboard Air Force One day with her new German Shepherd named Clipper that had been given to her by her father-in-law, Joe Kennedy. and we sent her a note. Fran will remember this. Question, what do you feed Clipper? And she wrote back, answer A, reporters. And when we asked Kennedy how he had become a Navy hero, he said it was absolutely involuntary. They sank my boat. And I remember when Kennedy gave a dinner for the Nobel Prize winners, and lifting his glass in a toast, he said, "Never have so many intellectuals gathered under one roof since Thomas Jefferson dined alone." And I remember when scientist Linus Pauling, also a Nobel winner, picketed the White House one day with a ban the bomb sign, went back to his hotel, changed into a tux, and came back to the White House dinner. And I thought it was a shining moment in democracy. And I remember when Sarah Vaughan sang at the White House and then danced with Johnson and Hubert Humphrey. And later the black singer tearfully told us, 25 years ago, I couldn't sit down in a restaurant in this town. Or when a rabbi spoke at the Martin Luther King rally at the Lincoln Memorial, and he said that the greatest sin of all during the Nazi era was silence. And I remember the frustration of LBJ during the Vietnam War as more and more supporters broke ranks. And one day at a White House reception, Johnson beckoned Senator Frank Church over, and he was very critical of the war at the time, and he asked him, "Just where do you get your ideas?" "From Walter Lippmann." Church replied, "Well," said Johnson, "the next time you need a dam in Idaho, you just ask Walter Lippmann." At his first press conference, 2 weeks after he was in office, Johnson was asked to cite his biggest problem, and he said, being president. Once, as a guest at the LBJ Ranch with a group of reporters, when Johnson was vice president, he took us for a walk down a country road one evening to visit his cousin Oriole. And we obviously wakened her, and when she came especially when she came padding barefoot to the door. And later I wrote that what I thought was a warm, sentimental story about a wonderful white-haired lady who lived in a ramshackle house. Cousin Oriole was furious, and she sent word back through Johnson, "Does Helen Thomas sleep with her shoes on?" And I remember when Johnson was taken to Bethesda Naval Hospital for gallbladder surgery. Psychiatric ward had been transformed into a press room. What happened to the patients? Johnson asked Bill Moyers, then his press secretary. "We gave them all press cards," said Moyers. And I remember at a dinner at the LBJ Ranch when Johnson asked Moyers, a defrocked Baptist minister, to say grace. Moyers bent his head, began to pray, and Johnson commanded, "Speak up, Bill." "I wasn't talking to you, Mr. President." Johnson used to impart a lot of wisdom to us. He used to tell us, "If anyone tells you I'm just a country boy, reach in your back pocket and see if your wallet is still there." And then there were those Bataan death marches around the South Lawn in the days before women were liberated and we all wore high heels. And I remember LBJ used to complain, "Y'all have the First Amendment," as if it was some weapon invented against presidents. And come to think of it, it is. And one day on the 10th round, Johnson said plaintively that when we were talking about the war, he said, "I've got all this power and I haven't used half of it yet." And that's when I really wanted to run for cover. And one of his favorite stories was of a lad who took an oral exam to become a brakeman on the trains. The boy was asked, "What would you